Welcome to another weekly edition of our StaySmart newsletter and podcast, brought to you by Viciniti Corporate Housing, where we try to keep you updated on what we see happening in business travel, corporate housing, relocation, anything that we think might be relevant to you and to your company. I'm coming to you from the middle of Kansas right now. We're having a little corporate retreat, doing some planning for 2024. And it is a chilly morning this morning, so it'll be interesting to see how much longer I can do these podcasts out in nature. We do have some good articles this week. The first one comes from the American Express Business Travel. They put out a forecast for hotel pricing in 2024. They're showing rates and occupancy up globally and just here in the U.S. They talk in particular about some of the markets, Dallas and Boston and Chicago and New York City, they're forecasting rates being up 8, 10, 12% next year as we just continue to see transient business travel meetings and conventions, big meetings and conventions coming back this year and into next year. It's interesting because it also talks about some new regulations in the short-term rental market, in particular New York City, that we've talked about previously on this podcast, how that's going to affect the supply in New York City, drive up rates. So I think that's interesting to watch as we continue to see hotel rates and occupancy continue to go up next year. And then another article from BTN talks about continuous pricing, the NDC. This is really about airline pricing. And so if you're a business travel buyer buying airline tickets, this is an interesting article. It's pretty complex, so I'm not going to go too in-depth into it. Read it if it's something that you're a travel buyer. But I think it's interesting because the NDC is kind of a new model, pricing model, the distribution method. So the traditional method is through the GDS. The NDC is just another channel that airlines can list their pricing through. So it talks about continuous pricing, dynamic pricing, and then traditional pricing. So read that if you're in that segment. An article about Airbnb. This in particular talks about Brian Chesky, CEO of Airbnb, talking about the potential for Airbnb in regards to long-term stays. So stays of 30 nights or longer. This is what we do. Vicinity Corporate Housing, we've been doing this since 1990. So this is an interesting article because it looks at maybe more competition in our segment. And it also talks about a lot of new features that Airbnb released this summer. But I think it's interesting because this article talks about something that we've talked about on this podcast, is how the new regulations, short-term rentals in New York City, also in Dallas and Phoenix, and this article talks about Florence and Paris. These regulations, a lot of them are for short-term rentals for stays of 30 nights or longer. So the reason why Airbnb might be making this change or looking at this opportunity is because of these new regulations of New York City in particular. All those regulations are for stays of less than 30 days. So if they have listings for longer than 30 days, they can still be out there. So I think that's interesting to keep an eye on. Another article talks about business travel in 2024. The majority of business travelers are going to be Gen Z and Millennials. 53% of business travelers are going to be Gen Z and Millennials starting in 2024. I'm Gen X, so I think it's kind of interesting that now moving forward, business travel, relocation, everything that we talk about this podcast is the younger generation, Gen Z and Millennials, and that change starts next year. I think that's fascinating, something we'll continue to watch. And then the last article that we have is about a new ride-sharing company called Alto. That's a little bit different than the traditional model, the Uber, the Lyft model, which is kind of a gig model where you're contracting with the driver. Alto is a little bit different where they're employing directly the drivers. They have 2,000 drivers throughout 5 cities, Dallas, Houston, LA, Miami, and DC, where they're employing their drivers. They're paying them $15 to $20 an hour. Alto owns the vehicle, pays for the gas. Their employee, they clock in, clock out, they get a 401k. An interesting model is their pitch is that you're going to get a better experience. The drivers are invested in the company and the driver experience. And I think it's interesting to watch. When I was in Dallas recently, I saw one of their cars. I just read this article. So I signed up. I got $30 off my first 3 rides. So I'm definitely going to try this company out the next time in one of these cities. So I think it's an interesting model. It does sound like it's gonna be a little bit more expensive than the traditional Uber or Lyft option, so we'll see how long this works. If you're willing to pay, a little bit more, maybe get a little bit better service, I think it'll be interesting to watch. So that's what I see transitioning this week. If you guys have any other questions that you would like us to answer, or if you'd like to learn anything else about Vicinity Corporate Housing, we are an ESOP. This is one of the things that we've been talking about here this week, is the values of our company. We're all employee owners. So if you have any questions about our company or how we can help you or Vicinity Corporate Housing, let us know. You can reach out to me directly, or you can put any of your questions in the comment sections here. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That's what I see transitioning this week. Take care, everyone.